A very good evening, Zimbabwe. You are listening to Studio 7 from the Voice of America in Washington on Monday, August 22nd, 2022. This is Live Talk. I am Gibbs Dube. Tonight on Live Talk, we are talking about hefty nomination fees unveiled by the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission ahead of the 2023 general elections. Presidential candidates will pay 20,000 United States dollars. That is 20 times up from the nomination fees paid in 2018. There has been an outcry in Zimbabwe over the new ZEC fees. The electoral body also hiked fees for aspiring parliamentarians from 50 United States dollars to 1,000 United States dollars. Senate and council election candidates will fork out $100 each. There were 23 presidential election candidates in 2018 disputed elections. Namhla zulukandaba sixoxa ngokukhutshulwa kwembadalo yokungena kukhetho lukamongameli olamalunga etale lephalamende kanye lolwamakhansili. iZimbabwe Electoral Commission ithi ofisa ukungena kukhetho lukamongameli kumele akhokhe inkulungwane ezingama-20 zamadola eMelika, 20,000 United States dollars. Ofuna ukuba lilunga ledale lephalamende kuzamele akhokhe amadola ayinkulungwane 1,000 United States dollars. Kuthi njalo ofuna ukungena kukhetho lweSenate lolwamakhansili kumele ke abhadale ikhulu lamadola 100 United States dollars. Bajinga kakhulu abantu ngalokhu, kodwa bakhona njalo abakusekelayo. And speaking today at a press conference in Harare, leader of the opposition National Constitutional Assembly, Professor LiveTalk, said he was not happy about the new ZEC fees.
Two corrupt business people will be able to fund all ZANU-PF expenses. Then our other dominant colleagues who have been in and so on, there's so many friends around the world. And I read on Twitter that in fact people say, who raised money for, but for the rest of us, we have read people and we don't agree, and we want to make it public that we do not agree with the perception that for us to enjoy our rights as citizens, we have to get the approval of other citizens. I have a right to stand as a presidential candidate, and I don't want to negotiate that right. No one is supposed to approve my standing. I mean, it is you either vote for me or you do not vote for me. I will campaign to be elected. But you cannot say, well, for you to enjoy that right, come to us, which is what ZEC is doing. So it's undemocratic. Then we also think that it is unconstitutional. And this one is a more fundamental point. Our constitution says that you all as media have access to section 67 of the constitution. It is very clear about the rights that we enjoy, political participation rights. Those rights must not be restricted unreasonably by these requirements. So we believe that what ZEC has done goes outside the constitutional parameters. Then that is an argument that we believe some people may take it to the courts, but we don't want to go to the courts at this time. ZEC must understand the sentiment that we're expressing. We then take that point up with who is ZEC to be coming up with these? That's the question that I want to address. Who is ZEC to be making this? These decisions ought to be made in the Constitution as to who qualifies and to what extent. So our Constitution doesn't set out these amounts that have to be paid. It just talks about, certain requirements that you have to meet as a citizen, you are registered as a voter, you meet residential qualifications and so forth. Then when you go to the Electoral Act, it then provides for some nominal fees that ought to be. But what ZEC has done is quite substantial. It is substantive. It is a power that ZEC is exercising as if it were a legislative body. It doesn't have the power to do that. And that the mere fact that ZEC is allowed by the Constitution to make certain regulations regarding elections would not give ZEC such drastic powers as overnight to change our political discourse. If you want to be with me on that point and follow it closely, if we allow ZEC to have that power, then there will be no need for us to have parliament.
That was Professor LiveTalk of the National Constitutional Assembly Party speaking to journalists in Harare today. Lawmaker Kutakapulu of the Opposition Citizens Coalition for Change says the new fees are unreasonable.
The statutory instrument sets the fees at $20,000 for a Zimbabwean who would like to become a candidate for president in the presidential election in 2023. It also sets the fees at 1,000 United States dollars if one wishes to contest to be in the House of Assembly. There are other, figures for council. I'm sure you have discussed them already. But if you look at all the fees are unreasonable and cannot be afforded by the average person in Zimbabwe who would like to contest in the elections. You have to consider this in the context of our constitution, which makes it a right for every citizen to participate in election, both in terms of voting and also by way of contesting in those elections. It's a clear right. It's in the Bill of Rights of our constitution. And so setting unreasonable fees amounts to an unreasonable limitation of that right to participate in the political affairs of the country. And so the unreasonableness or the reasonability, or let me say the reasonableness or unreasonability of the statutory instrument is what we are concerned with, or rather concerned about as we look at the statutory instrument. However, at this stage, it will be premature to run to court because it's only just been gazetted. Remember that once it's gazetted, it has to go to Parliament at some point. I think within a period of about 3 months, 2 or 3 months, it has to go to Parliament, where it will go to a parliamentary legal committee whose duty or whose mandate is to look at it to see whether this piece of legislation is constitutional or is desirable. And they will look at issues of reasonability. If it passes that stage, it will then be confirmed by Parliament as a statutory instrument in good order. It remains to see whether that will happen. But in the meantime, we all know that statutory instruments become effective the moment that they are gazetted. And in this case, this statutory instrument has been gazetted by the Zimbabwe Electoral.
That was a lawmaker Uxakaphulu of the Opposition Citizens Coalition for Change. We also spoke to Tafaswa Mgwadi, ZANU-PF Director of Information and Communications.
Kaona veZimbabwe Election Commission vachiisa mutemo wavo wekuti vanga vachinge vakwidza inodiwa kuti vanhu vange vachizokwanisa kuva vanokwikwidzwa musarudzo inoitika munyika yeZimbabwe. Vamwe vachipfutsumwawo nazvo. Isu semusangano weZANU-PF hatisati tagara pasi takapingamirirwa nebandiko redu reElections Directorate, zvekare nevatungamiriri vedu nemusangano weCentral Committee Monopoly. Kana ivavo matare iwayo asati agara pasi, tinenge tisina chokutaura pamusoro pezvinhu zvakaita seizvozvo zvinenge zvaitiwa, nokuti tinozopedzisira tinge totaura zvatinofunga senhengo kana kuti sevashandi vemusangano. Asi gwara remusangano sokutaurwa kwarinoitwa nemutungamiriri wedu vaMnangagwa rinotidzidzisa kuti tinotaura mashoko uye nokufambisa mashoko anenge awiriranwa nezvisungo zvinenge zvatorwa neutungamiriri wemusangano pamatare matare iwayo kuti zvisungo izvozvo. Saka pari zvino kana matare iwayo asati agara hatigoni kutaura pfungwa dzedu, nokuti musangano tinotaura pfungwa dzeruzhinji dzinenge dzawiriranwa neutungamiriri neruzhinji rwavanhu. Saka pari zvino hatina zvakawanda zvatinogona kutaura, asi chatinongoziva zvedu ndechekuti hachisi chinhu chitsva. Tikutarisawo zvinenge chiitika kune dzimwe nyika. Munoziva imi kuti sarudzo hadziitwi muZimbabwe chete, dzinoitwa pasi rose, asi dzimwe nyika dzine nzira dzakaita dzekuti vanhu kuti vange vachikondesa kana kukwidza musarudzo vanofanira kunge vaine mari dzavanofanira kunge vachibhadhara. Zvinotaridza kuti hongu vari serious, vakazvipira kunge vachida kutungamirira nyika, kwete zvokungoti nokuti kwanzi kwaita sarudzo takutonoti ndiitewo sarudzo. Hongu ikodzero yavo kunge vachidaro, hongu ikodzero yemunhu wese kungoti ange achikwikwidza.
Tafaswa Mgwadi is a ZANU-PF Director of Information and Communications. Independent political commentator Michael Ndiweni supports the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission's move to hike presidential election fees.
The $20,000 for me, it's fair for the presidential election. Why do I say so? I think that a candidate should be able to at least have 20,000 people can actually maybe assist him or her to raise 20,000 if you want to be president of the country. So I think for me that's a fair. It's a fair figure. It could be a bit higher, but I think it's fair. But I have a problem with the 1,000 for members of parliament. 1,000 is too high. Looking at the income levels of many Zimbabweans, particularly young people, and particularly those that you find, maybe, for instance, young people in marginalized communities in rural areas, in some rural areas. If they want to be MPs, they could be doing exceptional work in communities, but then for them to be able to raise 1,000 for them to pay, for them to contest for being an MP, and that money I think is non-refundable. I think it's too high. It's too high for an ordinary person. I would have thought also that maybe it was supposed to be arranged around maybe half or somewhere thereabout, or at least a quarter of what has been proposed. Even for the councillors, for me, it's too high. Very few people are earning such. Yes, we know that leaders people who are able to take care of themselves should be able to raise such kind of money, but my view that is too high, like for the MPs. For the councillors, yeah, it's fair though, but I think could be also reduced a bit so that it caters for those young people who are doing good work in communities, who have the capacity also to be councillors, who may start to raise such kind of figures.
That was independent political commentator Michael Ndiweni. We also spoke to Tanazani Moyo, a Zimbabwean youth interested in politics. Nanko kwethuliwe ngosakhulayo uTandazani Moyo.
Qala kangivumelani le ntengo ekhutshiliweyo ukuthi abantu bangene ekhethweni ngoba sibheka isimo somnotho eselizweni leZimbabwe. Iningi labantu abafuna ukungena bancintise kwezokhetho kumbe kwezombusazwe kabasebenzi. Okokuqala, abanye ngabathengisayo, abanye ngabayelusa izinkomo, abanye abangakaze beqhatshwe ezimpilweni zabo. Kodwa masibheka ebantwini bona labo ingqondo ezijulileyo njalo lama-ideas angathuthukisa ilizwe atholakala kibo. So kakumelanga thina sizifanise lamanye amazwe ukuthi sile working class eningi. Thina eZimbabwe silabantu abaningi abangasebenziyo, and bona labo bantu yibo kumele sibebe ngama-councillor wethu, yibo kumele babe ngama-MP wethu, yibo njalo kumele babe kudale lesenate. So masingabanikezi amathuba lapha siyabasegregata kahle kahle, siyabavimba, siyababandlulula. Sokunganti umbusazwe usungowabantu abalemali kuphela, sokunganti umbusazwe usungowegroup ayabantu aba-rich kuphela, labo abangela mali kabasakhona kungena. Angisoze ngikhulume kakhulu on behalf of ama-political parties kumbe amabandla ezombusazwe, ngoba amabandla ezombusazwe bakhona ukuyenza ama-fundraising ngoba bayi-institution, bona bayi-organization. Kodwa silabantu abangase-organization abangama-individuals, sinabantu abafuna ukungena njengama-independent candidates, and bona labo bantu ngeke bekhone ukungena ngoba imali yankhona yabe isiningi kakhulu. Ngabantu abanye ababekuyikuthi ngabantu ade bezasithuthukisela ilizwe, kodwa asisabanikezi amathuba ngoba sesikhuphule izintengo. And then ngimuve forward kwindaba ka-president. Mina ngilombono ongathi uhlukile kwindaba ka-president. Ngo-2018 bengabheke kakhulu ama-elections bese silabo president abaningi kakhulu, abanye labangela ncedo nje ukuthi umuntu angabona kuchipi lapho ngiyafaka imali. Izinto ezigcina sezizala opolati, abagcina bethatha imali zama-taxpayers ezethu ezokubhadala imithelo, sibe siyathengelana izimota, sibe siyahlala emahoteleni. So ngicabanga ukuthi kasibe nomuntu o-affordayo ukuba ngu-president. Ngicabanga ukuthi 20,000 mina i-right iyenela. Ma ufuna ukuba ngu-president, you should raise that 20,000. You should have abantu all over ilizwe, kumbe you should have an institution that is backing you ukuthi kunikeze leyo 20,000. So angina nkinga kakhulu nemali ka-president, kodwa ngikhulumela intsha abafuna ukuba ngamakhansela, intsha abagraduate ezikoleni ezihlukeneyo, ama-engineers, ama-doctors, ama-political scientists, ama-economists endaweni ezihlukeneyo. Bona labo bantu yibo abantu esifuna badrive ilizwe lethu. babantu esifuna bakhokhele ikhanseli yethu. Manje kasilamanzi koBulawayo, kasilamanzi eHarare, kasilamanzi eShitungwiza, kasilamanzi kuphi kuphi, ngoba silabantu abalemali kuphela abaphakathi kodwa bangakwaziyo abakwenzayo. So sifuna abantu abatsha abangaze basebenze bayesebenzela lapha ekhanseli. So bazosebenza kanjani ekhansili mase sikhuphule intengo? So ngivumelana nalabo asebethatha izekhi kukhoti, bese khoti abayihambise ekhoti iyehlise intengo yamakhansela le ama MPs, ngoba lapho okubuswa khona ilizwe from a community level.
That was Tanazani Moyo, a Zimbabwean youth living in South Africa. Let's take a brief break. Please stay tuned. For those that have just joined us, please note that we are streaming this discussion live on our Facebook pages, VOA Shona, VOA Studio 7, and VOA Ndebele. We are also live on YouTube, VOA Zimbabwe. Joining us via Skype from London is Mr. Xavier Zavare of the ruling ZANU-PF party. Good evening, sir. How are you? Hello.
Well, I don't know why you keep referring me as Mr. Hello?
I understand.
Hello?
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
I can hear you. It's Comrade Zavara, Mr.
Next time I'll do that.
Prime Minister.
Next time I'll refer you to that kind of situation. So anyway, tell us a bit about what you think about the ZEC fees. What's your take on that?
Okay, I mean, in this instance, I will stand by what our director, Fatwa, has said, in the sense that as a part.
No, I think what we can do is let's get you maybe via phone, because you are cutting a bit. So let's try to get him later in the show. As for the moment, let's welcome Mr. Itai Marombeta of the Opposition Citizens Coalition for Change. Welcome to the show, sir.
Oh, thank you, Gibbs. Thank you to listeners. Right, it's a very interesting topic that you've brought for us to share and discuss. The astronomical fees that the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission has published is a reflection of the command politics characteristic of ZANU-PF regime, which is now permeating in ZEC, which is supposed to be an independent institution. I'm saying that because you will reckon that there was no consultation that was done with key stakeholders, that is the political players and the parties, who should actually be the very critical component of the whole electoral process, which ZEC is supposed to be serving. This, I understand, was something that was brought through the Ministry of Justice, and it was gazetted through the ministry. And again, this is an indictment that the doubling in terms of the influence of government institutions and the hand of the ruling party in the decisions that the Electoral Commission is making can be observed here. Gibbs, you will note that ZEC is a public institution which is funded by taxpayers. And the same taxpayers who are heavily taxed citizens are expected to mobilize funds to support their party candidates. You will reckon that most of these party candidates who will be vying in the 2023 election do not necessarily have the resources, given the economic situation that we have in Zimbabwe, and they rely basically on their supporters, who are also burdened and in economic dire stress. So imposing such figures, $20,000 for the presidential candidates, $1,000 for members of parliament, it is grossly unfair. And for me, this is my perspective. For me, it is this fundraising. I think it's an endeavor by a broke government to try and fund the entire electoral process.
Yes. So before maybe you proceed, let's bring in Xavier Zabare in London. So I think right now he's on the phone.
Okay.
Zabare, welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, you got kind of, I think our Skype was a bit slow. Yes.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so what is your take on the new fees, the ZEC fees?
All right. So like I was saying earlier on, in this instance, I stand guided by what our Director for Information, Comrade Chavatsuka Mugadi, has said, which is that at this moment in time, we haven't got a party position because, as you know, ZANU-PF has got a way of doing things. We don't do things haphazardly. We are an institution that is well organized. Our central committee, our Politburo, basically our leaders, ask you to sit down and have a look at ZEC proposed fees, bearing in mind that we've got nothing to do with ZEC. We are like any other political party that is affected by ZEC decisions. ZEC, which is an independent electoral body, despite all the mud or the things that the opposition might say or throw at ZEC. But what I must say in this instance, and what we must understand, is that democracy is not cheap anywhere in the democratic world. Democracy has never been cheap. If you look in the United Kingdom, for example, here where I am, to participate in the election as a councillor, you have to pay £500 deposit fee. That's what democracy is all about. You go to South Africa to participate in the municipal elections, you have to part with anything between 2,000 and 4,000 rand.
But in Zimbabwe,
it's not like ZEC is doing something that is not done in the democratic world across the world. It is done even by developed countries. In America, where you are, to participate in elections for any citizen is not cheap. So,
okay, can I
it's
yes, before you chip in, I think I've got a question.
Respectable people like, Comrade Lovemo Maduku or Professor Lovemo Maduku end up getting entangled in all these things. Democracy is not cheap. We must understand that.
Yes,
if we want democracy, somewhere.
Yes, let me pose the question. Let me pose the question, Zabari. You can respond in Shona here. But Zimbabwe, yacho hapana mari yacho ichabva kupi? Because economy yadona.
Izvozvo zvokuti hanzi Zimbabwe haina mari ndo zvinotaurwa nemi makomenteta vari papi. Vakomana vari kuZimbabwe vanokuchengetai mukabva kuAmerica mukaendako. Vanayo mari anatendai biti. Imbinga vaya anachamisa. Handidi. Vese vakomana ana Jacob Mafume vane mari vakomana vaya. And you talk of the councillors, vamwe vatinotoziva kuti awu takakura tichienda naye kuchikoro handidi vane massive properties just from being councillors vanayo mari. If they are serious about participating in elections, okay, they have to fund that election. They have to pay what ZEC is requesting. You know, ZEC represents us ordinary citizens of Zimbabwe in terms of managing elections. So if ZEC says that, no, actually, we need to have some fees for us to be able to manage these processes, and ZEC introduces fees, then, you know, we all just have to look at it, and what we can actually debate or discuss is probably what Professor Maduku was saying, has ZEC followed the right procedures or processes? That's a separate debate. As far as the fees are concerned, for me, in my individual debate, because democracy is paid for.
Right, let's bring in, yes.
Pay for it.
Yes, let's bring in Mr. Marombedza.
Yeah, it is very, very unfortunate when someone speaks from an individual perspective and makes insinuations that identify individuals. Like, for instance, he talks of BT is rich, this one has money, and so forth. This is a myopic kind of approach when you look at the politics. Because we are not talking of individuals, but we are including politics and people who should. Can you give me chance? You were talking. Can you give?
Who are rich? When we talk about your individuals who are filthy rich from corruption, you start talking rubbish. You start thinking I'm talking myopic.
It's unfortunate you don't respect the platform. I gave you the chance to talk, and you are interfering.
All right, Zobare, let's give him a chance. Let's give him a chance. Marombedza, go ahead, say.
Okay. I was saying it's quite unfortunate that someone has this very narrow view when we talk about a national discourse of politics and starts to bring in individuals, mudslinging them and all that. Here we are talking about policies that affect each and every individual, whether you have a lot of money as an individual in a political party or not. The person who is in Idotito, who would want to contest at a parliamentary level in our forthcoming elections, should have an equal opportunity to be able to contest and be able to afford not to be, excluded because of their limited financial resources, just to have themselves nominated. So this is what we are talking about. We are not looking at individuals who have so much money and so forth. No one has talked about the money that ZANU-PF, whether individuals or an institution has looted and said maybe they are charging.
Yes, Marombedza.
We're not talking about that.
Marombedza, 1 second.
From a broad perspective.
1 second. Let's bring in Mr. Zobare. Zobare, you've got the floor for the next 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, no, the thing is, you democracy for if you are going to participate, you must be prepared to fund your election as an individual. It doesn't matter where you are. If you are going to participate anywhere in the world, you know that if you are going to get involved in election, you've got to fork money. Hakuna chemahara ngatiregedze kuda kutaura tichinyeperana tichitaura mafantasy nema-utopian thinking and ideas here.
Yes.
Let's talk truth. Let's talk very realistic in an election campaign.
Right, Zobare, I'll bring you back
to be funded.
Zobare,
yes. Individual, if you want to participate wherever you are coming from, you have to.
Thank you, Zobare. I'll bring you back with Mr. Marombedza in the next show. So thank you very much. That was Xavier Zobare and Mr. Itai Marombedza. We've come to the end of the show. Signing off is Gibbs Dube in Washington, D.C. saying good night, Zimbabwe.